Bending in the breeze, bend with me, sway with ease, sway with me at the wind.
He was the man who made cool look effortless, a glass in his hand, a grin on his lips, and a song smoother than velvet. Dean Martin didn't just perform, he hypnotized. Women adored him, men copied him. Las Vegas practically crowned him its king. But behind that perfect smile was a vault of scandals, secrets, and heartbreaks that Hollywood buried deep. Affairs with mob daughters, a double life that fooled even his closest friends, a tragic silence after the death of his beloved son, and a private pain so heavy that in his final years, Dean Martin became a ghost in his own home. On Christmas Day, 1995, the king of cool left this world quietly, but the truth he carried about the Rat Pack, about his family, about himself, was anything but quiet. So what did Dean Martin really hide? And when the curtain closed for the last time, was he still the legend everyone adored, or just a broken man who never escaped being Dino, the poor immigrant kid who never truly belonged? From Dino to Dean, before the tuxedos and spotlights, he was just Dino Paul Crocetti, the son of Italian immigrants in Steubenville, Ohio. He spoke only Italian at home, and when he stepped into school, kids mocked him for his broken English. He never shook off that feeling of being the outsider. By age 16, he dropped out, no diploma, no future, just fists, charm, and a need to survive. He hustled wherever he could. Steel mills, gas stations, running bootleg liquor. He even boxed under the name Kid Crochet. He lost 11 of 12 fights, leaving the ring with a busted nose and scarred knuckles. But the ring taught him a lesson he carried for life. Take the hit, get up, smile like it never happened. And that became the foundation of Dean Martin, the man who could shrug off anything, finding the voice that changed everything. One night while working at a casino, Dino sang casually for co-workers. A band leader overheard and was stunned. His voice wasn't trained, but it was raw, magnetic. Soon Dino Martini, later renamed Dean Martin, was born. It wasn't instant fame, it was smoky bars, cheap suits, half-empty rooms. But when Dean crooned, women leaned in, bartenders dimmed the lights, and everyone knew something special was happening. Dean and Jerry, a meteoric explosion, and a secret break. Dean's career changed forever when he teamed up with a wiry, manic young comedian, Jerry Lewis. The smooth crooner and the wild comic were opposites, but together they lit up stages like no one had ever seen. They were chaos and control, laughter and song, brotherhood and tension. By the late 40s, Martin and Lewis were everywhere. Radio, TV, movies, the hottest act in America. But behind the laughs, Dean was quietly boiling. Critics gushed over Jerry's genius and dismissed Dean as just the straight man. 10 years in, Dean had enough. He ended the act coldly, never looking back. Jerry later said it felt like losing a brother. Dean, he just muttered, "I was nothing more than a straight man, and it broke me." The breakup was a scandal in itself. But Dean's solo career soared higher than anyone imagined. The Rat Pack, brotherhood, mob ties, and illusions. By the early 60s, Dean Martin had joined forces with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, the legendary Rat Pack. Together they ruled Las Vegas. Ocean's 11, packed casinos, all-night parties, and the image of untouchable cool. But behind the glamour, scandal, mob ties. Sinatra's connections to mob bosses were notorious, and the pack was never far from that smoke. Dean himself wasn't innocent. He'd run liquor during Prohibition and knew how to move in those circles, but Dean played it differently. When mobsters once thanked him for helping them out, Dean simply said, "I did it for Frank," then walked away. No fear, no blood. The drinking illusion. Fans thought Dean was the hardest drinker in the group. In reality, his glass often held apple juice. The slurred speech, the lazy swagger. It was an act, a $1 million act. He let people believe the myth because it made him untouchable. But as much as Dean avoided trouble, the Rat Pack lifestyle pulled him into shadows he never escaped. Love, lust, and scandal behind the curtains. Dean Martin made romance look effortless, but his private life was anything but smooth. First marriage, Elizabeth Betty McDonald, 4 kids, 8 years, ended in divorce. Dean shockingly won custody, almost unheard of in the 40s. Second marriage, John Beager, the so-called love of his life, 3 more kids. They divorced but stayed strangely close. Third marriage, Catherine Hahn, brief and fiery, ending within 3 years. But the biggest scandal came from Sandra Lansky, daughter of mob boss Meyer Lansky. In her memoir, she revealed a secret affair with Dean Martin, even while John was pregnant. She claimed Dean once made love to her 6 times in a single night, fueled by Coca-Cola and silence. No talk of spouses, no talk of guilt, just passion, escape, and the unspoken understanding that nothing about Dean Martin was as perfect as it seemed. It was the kind of revelation that shook the carefully built image of family man Dean, but he never addressed it. That was his style. Secrets stayed secret. The fall, the silence, and the secrets he carried forever. Family chaos and hidden wounds. Dean Martin was the king of cool to the world, but inside his own home, life was complicated. With 3 marriages and 7 biological children, plus 1 adopted, Dean's family life was a maze of loyalty, heartbreak, and scandal. He wasn't a perfect father. He was often absent, wrapped in the spotlight, and left his children craving more of his attention. Still, they loved him fiercely, because when Dean showed up, he had a way of making every room lighter, but that light wasn't consistent, and one tragedy would soon dim it forever. The son who meant everything, Dean Paul Martin Jr., known as Dino Jr., wasn't just Dean's son. He was his pride, handsome, charismatic, and ambitious. Dino Jr. wasn't content to ride on his father's fame. He became a professional tennis player, fronted a pop group, and eventually joined the Air National Guard as a jet pilot. Dean admired him for it. Dino Jr. had courage. He was bold in a way that reminded Dean of who he once wanted to be. But on March 21, 1987, the unthinkable happened. While flying an F-4 Phantom jet during a training mission, Dino Jr.'s plane went down near California's San Gorgonio Mountain. He was only 35. The news shattered Dean. Friends recalled that when he got the call, he didn't scream, didn't collapse. He went silent, and that silence never left him. Dean withdrew from the world. He walked away from a Rat Pack reunion tour, abandoned projects, and began spending most of his time alone. To the public, he was still Dean Martin, but privately, the man behind the sunglasses was gone. Jerry Lewis, his old partner turned estranged friend, later said, "When that boy died, Dean died too." The mask begins to slip. In the late 1980s and into the 90s, Dean Martin became almost unrecognizable compared to the man who once ruled Las Vegas. He rarely gave interviews. When he did appear in public, the trademark grin seemed forced. Friends said his eyes were hollow, his voice quieter, his jokes less sharp. He watched old westerns on TV, flipped through comic books, smoked, and kept to himself. The image of the Rat Pack legend with a drink in hand had been reduced to a lonely man in Beverly Hills, sitting in silence. And yet he carried on the mask. Fans didn't see the broken man. They only saw reruns of the Dean Martin show, heard That's Amore on the radio, and assumed he was still the same charismatic icon. But his closest friends knew Dean Martin had become a ghost in his own life. The final secret, refusing the fight. By the early 90s, the years of smoking and hard living caught up to him. Doctors diagnosed Dean with lung cancer in They urged surgery, treatments, anything that might buy him more time. But Dean refused. He told his friends, "Let it come. I've had a good life." But had he? That's the question that haunted him, and still haunts his story. He wasn't bitter, but he was done. No hospitals, no desperate fight against the inevitable, just quiet acceptance. The last goodbye on Christmas Day, 1995. Dean Martin passed away in his Beverly Hills home at the age of 7. The man who had filled the world with songs and laughter slipped away in silence. Las Vegas, the city he helped define, dimmed its neon lights for one full minute, a tribute no other entertainer had ever received. It was the city's way of saying goodbye to the man who had made it sparkle. At his funeral, there were no cameras, no grand speeches, just family, close friends, and a single line carved into his crypt: "Everybody loves somebody sometime." As if even in death, Dean Martin wanted to be remembered for love, not loss. The scandals and secrets he took with him. Dean Martin's life was filled with contradictions. He was a faithful husband in public, yet tangled in affairs with mob daughters in secret. The heaviest drinker in the Rat Pack, except his glass was often apple juice. A man surrounded by laughter, yet hollowed out by grief. He built an illusion so powerful that even his closest friends sometimes forgot where the performance ended and the man began. And that may have been his greatest secret of all. Dean Martin wasn't the indestructible king of cool. He was Dino, the immigrant's son who never felt like he belonged, who used charm and songs to mask the pain, and who carried scandals, heartbreak, and sorrow to the grave. So here's the question: was Dean Martin truly happy behind that smile? Or was he simply the greatest actor Hollywood ever produced, playing a part until the curtain finally closed? Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you want more untold stories of old Hollywood, the scandals, the heartbreaks, and the truths they never wanted you to know, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because we're just getting started.